Do you know one of the largest bike companies that sell in the United States and globally is basically unheard of? No, this is not Trek or Specialized. You guys get off your little high horse there. Somebody's way bigger than that. Oh yeah, and it's not Canyon. It is Pon Holdings. Pon Holdings, you say? Who is Pon? Is that a pawn shop? Pawn shops are the... Oh, no, that's not it. What we're talking about is a company that owns a lot of companies and multiple different types of manufacturing as well as industries. Yeah, Pon Holdings, a big one. With my 35 years of experience, I haven't really heard of Pon Holdings until a couple years ago, which is kind of insane to me. Really, yeah, kind of insane. Been working in bike shops here and there and everywhere with multiple different brands. Yeah, let's review what Pon Holding is today and actually where they came from after this. Well, to understand what Pon Holdings is today, we need to go back in their rich history. Yeah, they're pretty old, believe it or not. They actually age out past Fuji, which is one crazy thought because they were 1889 or something like that. Pon Holdings actually started in 1867, and it is a Dutch company that sold soaps, sewing machines, and bicycles. Crazy. So they're a very old company, and through the early part of the 19th century, they acquired or worked with Volkswagen after the war, and also into Caterpillar. You know, the big industrial moving machines that move heaven and earth. That company, yeah, they own them. But that's interesting. But through all those decades, through the early 19th century to mid 19th century actually, well, they didn't really have any cycling world experience or kind of not gone that direction over all those years. But with investment companies, they grew over that period of time. Cycling was partially a passion in some sort. It had to be because they found opportunity in, guess what, 2011, which they purchased Derby Cycles, which owned Cervélo, which are big names in themselves, stand to right. But also they purchased in 2017 Indigo, which is a car company, which is high-end cars, you say. Porsche, Audi, Lamborghini. Oh my goodness. What kind of company is this that owns high-end cars that bought into bikes with some high-end lines? Oh yes. This is some rich history here. But the history is just a small part of actually their cycling influence and actually aggression of taking over certain markets. They are a global company, mainly out of Europe, absolutely. But from there, they've actually branched out into the United States and other countries and other markets. The other big purchase, which is within the current 4 years, is they purchased Dorel. Dorel actually owned a lot more other companies, which is different than Cervélo and Santa Cruz. Those housed old school brands like Schwinn, Monggose, GT, Cannondale, you know, the greats and the classics of the 90s. They have bred new life with new insurgents with a good backing. So with all these acquisitions in the last 4 to 5 years, they've gotten up to close to 50 different brands within the cycling realm itself. So they have Pon Bike versus Pon Holdings, where yes, they have actually started manufacturing a lot of their bikes, different ones here and there, and they also still leverage the Chinese and the Taiwan market to produce bikes. But it doesn't stop there. In 2021, at the height of the COVID, well, they decided to buy a bike shop, Mike's Cyclery. Well, Mike's Cyclery had 12 locations in California, which is the hottest universe of selling cycling year-round. They don't have a season, they just have cycling season. With that purchase, they also bought Roseville Cyclery, which is smaller, two locations in Roseville, obviously, California, but they were a Specialized dealer, and at that time, Specialized was buying bike shops as well in that particular market. They snuck those away from Specialized. And here lies where I found out about Pon or heard about Pon. In 2022, there was a bike chain in Lower Denver Metro called Evolution Cycles. They were a very big Trek dealer, and Trek at the time was doing some heavy purchasing, and they were in hunt of that particular market. Well, they had 4 or 5 locations that they desperately wanted. Through that acquisition and starting with the owners, well, guess who swooped in and stole those 4 locations from Trek? Yeah, Pon Holdings under Mike Cyclery. Well, yes, they switched those particular locations from Trek dealers to, you guessed it, Santa Cruz, Cannondale, and some other various brands of the upper lines of the Pon Holdings group. Very interesting, aggressive market. When you're looking at this particular company, they are doing everything and probably a little better than the Trek and the Specialized and the Giant. Yes, they have bike shops. Well, they're buying those up and put them under Mike's Bikes because who knows Pon, so they're not going to do them there. And then they can filter and swap out their 50 different brands within those locations. Brilliant. In addition to, they own several brands from, you guessed it, from department store level, from Walmart and Target, to sporting good locations like Dick's Sporting Goods, REI, in addition to the independent bike dealers. Whoa, they are actually pulling from all the markets. Sounds really familiar of a company doing that in the 90s. Oh yeah, Trek. So for a little known company, Pon Holdings, owning 50 different brands and very strong brands. Yes, you see the Cervelos and the Tour de France and the Santa Cruzes and, you know, the GTs and Cannondales. Yes, and those you'll probably see in a lot of different bike shops, which they've been filtered in and out of sporting goods stores as well. Not so much into the department brands, which they have those lines too. So they're actually really capitalizing on the cycling market as a whole, not just here in the United States, but globally. That puts us with our current affairs of situation now. What's going on in 2025? Well, our current situation's not that great. We're talking about a lot of companies basically going under and being reskinned. Pros Closet is one, got purchased up, and they're going to be rebranded. Planet Cyclery and Colorado Cyclists, amongst a few others, have been purchased just for the names, even though they went bankrupt and under. And all of a sudden, you're going to have reskinned companies like Cambria Cycles owning that brand and refaced basically through their websites. You have all these changes and shell games and so forth. Well, that's what Dorel did back in the day, as well as Derby Cycles. They gobbled up all those brands and built them up. Lo and behold, now they're all under Pon Holdings. Is this the status quo going to be the same with these shell games? And is Trek and Specialized in trouble enough to where Pon Holdings could be an enticing buyer? Maybe, maybe not, most likely not. But in any case, they actually have a huge influence in the cycling industry where a lot of people have no clue who these guys are. They only know the actual companies by brand, like Cervélo, Cannondale, GT, you know, those brands. So in my cycling world, now let's pick on a few of these, right? The biggest ones that I know of personally, like Cannondale. Cannondale's been in shops for decades, right? I remember Cannondale back in the 90s doing really good aluminum made in the United States. Well, when Dorel owned them, they were trying to do reassemble bikes in the United States. Kind of a way of having things built overseas and built in the United States and say hand built in the United States-ish. In any case, I think that got completely shut down during the purchase of Pon Holdings because I haven't heard of anything of that facility that they had grand ideas of doing. Besides, a lot of manufacturing is done overseas and also in Europe. But currently there's been actually a release of layoffs at Cannondale, which has been kind of hush-hush, but it's probably a readjustment of 1%. Pretty much every company is going through this. In the last year, GT got pulled out of the big box stores, I think Dick's Sporting Goods and something else, being rebranded and put back into the independent bike dealers with a direct-to-consumer overlay, kind of like Trek and Specialized-ish. But in any case, they're not a huge line. You go to their website and they have, you know, a lot of mountain bikes, a few BMX bikes, which is their origins, and a couple gravel bikes, but nothing in road. Santa Cruz has been the quiet one in the news, but the actually former founder of Santa Cruz has moved to Specialized to help them out. And Santa Cruz has had switched out a couple of CEOs and restructuring the last couple of years, but they are being a brand that's being built by them in Europe, as a matter of fact. And Cervélo and Focus, probably the bigger names of the big group, but mostly for road Tour de France. Yeah, you see those Cervelos all over the place. When I worked at Lee Cycler, we carried Cervélo, and they're really a cool line. But recently they had to close a factory in Europe, but they're building one in Lithuania, I think, if I said that right. They broke ground on it about a year ago. So that might be a kind of a shift. I'm not sure what brands are going there. It's been kind of hush-hush, but the European news probably has a little more detail on this. I just really haven't done the big deep dive yet on that. So now I got you all caught up on Pon and the 50 brands that they carry, and they've been acquiring them for the last 15 years or so pretty aggressively, including bike shop locations. With this in mind, they are definitely a huge contender. I would say maybe not as big as Trek in the sense of store locations, but as in brand and actually in storefronts, way bigger. And also they're in the European market. Well, Trek and Specialized have been trying to go after that for years. Well, they have basically home field advantage there. Absolutely. So now knowing the brands, what's going to look like for a company like Pon Holdings? I mean, we talked about Specialized and Trek and so forth. And I know that pretty well in the current market of the United States and how they've been leveraging certain different perspectives, you know, locations and going to direct to consumer and used bikes for Trek. So there lies what is a company like Pon Holdings going to do in the next 3 to 5 years with the disarray of the cycling industry that we're in. Well, they have plenty of different directions to go. One is the huge one is, well, they have Schwinn and Monggose where they're pulling in. Yes, the biggest market of cycling is actually being pulled from Walmart and Target. This is nothing new. It's been happening since like the 80s, and the other 10 to 15% is being fought over by the local bike shops and independent bike dealers. Now, of course, Trek and Specialized and their own locations and a few giant stores as well. But let's start with the top down. With a big company like Pon, they can definitely pull money from different directions and move things around. Not going to say any particular line is going to be cut or liquidated. Maybe some of the smaller ones if it doesn't prove to be any profitability to it. But the e-bike craze is still going on. It's going to carry on, but slowly degrade. Also, the gravel bikes are pretty strong because let's face it, it's a very versatile bike, and people seem to like it when they have their own pedal power. Well, looking at that, they also have the big companies like Porsche and Audi and all those. Well, those sometimes suffer a little bit with economies going kind of sideways, but you got to think about it. They're global in a strong sense of global. Specialized and Trek are too, but not as intense as this and as diverse. So pockets are super deep. They're going to do readjustments and realignments, which may sound huge, but for them and their size is actually pretty micro. You're looking at the particular companies and they're moving them around, which is one interesting fact that the companies that they have like Cannondale and Cervélo and Santa Cruz, they all have their own CEOs and ran almost independently in a sense. So they're actually ran like a bike company. Therefore, they have those kind of insights and proper decision making going forward. Well, with those particular companies, they can actually leverage that to hopefully bring the prices down and also focus on more entry level, better quality bikes. That's going to be one of the big key pieces to compete against the inflated prices of high-end bikes, because that market is basically dead in the water. And it's going to be for several years because everybody that can afford that bike, that's $5,000 to $10,000, is not going to buy one anytime soon. So therefore, the entry level is the big gateway to get into cycling. Well, they already have leverage on Schwinn and Monggose. Yeah, they're pretty low end nowadays. But when you're looking at like GT and Cannondale and a few other brands that they carry, they can drop some of those price points below $1,000 and start cultivating that cycling community again, helping leverage bike shops to have a brand to do so, and also build up 1 or 2 or 3 of their brands and keep the niche lines like Cervélo and Santa Cruz a little more protected. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Then you look at the retail layer of it, which is really insane. Let me just say insane, because when you have that much power of at the bike shop level, one bike shop can say, we can't move these. They can shift them to another market. In addition to, they'll bring in a different brand even to help cultivate that cycling community where those stores are. I don't think they're going to be closing any stores like Trek and possibly Specialized in the next year or two. They actually might be doing the opposite and buying up some of those locations where Trek and Specialized are pretty crippling right now to be able to jump on those opportunities. Obviously, this company is almost hitting a 2-century mark coming up in the 60s. So looking at a company that's been around and did some very good decisions and has pretty deep pockets, they're looking at the long game, longer than Trek and Specialized and Giant can even conceive. So yes, one of the biggest fish out there that manipulates and controls a lot of the market that we never even heard of. What's their intentions? Not sure. They're pretty quiet, but they're basically a for-profit company. But a lot of the shops that have acquired still have a lot of original staff, and they're trying to build up a good name. So under Mike's Bikes, yeah, they're going to keep plugging forward, most likely. And that's my opinion, being in the cycling industry for over 35 years and not even hearing about this company until like 2 years ago. Well, in my defense, they only started up pretty early in the 2011. Therefore, it's just the last 15 years. And you know me, I work on a lot of the older bikes. Oh, wait, what is that? Oh, that's a bike from the other huge manufacturer that sells in the United States. It's international, called Kent International. Gordini from the Menem line. Well, anyway, thanks for hanging out with me. If you heard of these lines, if you worked with them currently under the Pon Holdings, if you work at shops or had any experience, please share below in the comments. Any extra insights would be very, very helpful to the community that I'm building here. And again, this is mostly my opinion piece of my observation of being a little guy in a garage shop, but yet been in the industry for over 35 years, so I got some opinions, of course. They seem like they're doing a pretty good job, and if it's nice in your neck of the woods, please go for a ride. Also, if you do have one of these bikes and how they perform and how those shops at Mike's Bikes, if you shop there, please add. I'd love to hear it. In any case, thanks for hanging out with me in your garage. Until next time, have a wonderful day.